DiscerningHearts.com presents Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors. I'm your host, Kris McGregor, and I'm delighted to be joined by Anne Costa, who is a wife, mother, writer, and co-host of Refresh Me, Lord, a weekly Catholic radio program. She is the founder of Veronica Ministries and conducts an international speaking apostolate through Charismata, Coaching for Abundant Life. With Anne Costa, we go inside the pages of Embracing Edith Stein, Wisdom for Women from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, published by Servant Books. Anne, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you, Kris, for asking me.
I'm so excited to be able to bring Embracing Edith Stein to a whole audience of people who think what you've done in this book has really just brought us the woman and her really rich spirituality. Thank you so much.
Yes, that was what my hope was, because I never related to Edith Stein as in an intellectual way, but obviously she's a very brilliant woman, a philosopher. I've never taken a philosophy course, but when I left the Catholic Church and came back, her Essays for Women was one of the first books I read, and it just resonated so deeply within my heart and confirmed everything I knew but was never told about what it is to be a woman, as God created me. So it was a beautiful meeting of this wonderful contemporary saint who I think has a lot to say to women in our day. I really do believe she is a woman saint for our times.
If you could, Anne, just give us a brief background on where she was born and her particular life and times.
Sure. Edith was born, she was the youngest of 11 children in Breslau, Germany, back in the late 1800s. So, in a sense, she is a contemporary. She grew up in the early 1900s, 1930s. She rose to prominence in Germany as a scholar and a philosopher. She was known as a feminist at the time. She was Jewish, and so that was a tumultuous time, obviously, prior to World War II. She met a lot of opposition in her life, first of all. Because she was so brilliant, she was actually a little bit full of herself. And as she studied, she changed and learned a little bit more about what it was to actually give of herself through as a nursing person in the Red Cross. And that was one of the changes in her life, that she understood that service for a woman was really very fulfilling. And she experienced a balance there with physical labor, which she felt was really important, but also intellectually she was so brilliant that she was beyond her years. So she grew to understand and a humility that came with time. But she had given up praying at the age of 13 and was in deep pursuit of truth. What she was looking for was truth all of her life, and that brought her an intellectual brilliance, but sort of an emptiness. And but she never stopped seeking, and she was a very observant woman, and she was influenced by some Catholic philosophers by the name of a gentleman by the name of Max Scheler, and another person who happened to be very instrumental in influencing our Pope John Paul II. They were contemporaries also in philosophy, and she was very influential as she grew in her life. So I want to talk about the fact that she went from all this headiness to a place of emptiness and looking for something more. She found that and was influenced by a friend who lost her husband, who was a Lutheran who became a Catholic. And she expected the woman to be absolutely devastated because of the death of her beloved husband. But what she found instead was a faith, a sense of faith and confidence and even joy in the face of that trial. And that was not lost on her, and she wanted more of that. Then on a vacation, she went to a Catholic church, was just visiting for the beauty of it, and she noticed a woman coming in with a basket, sitting down in the middle of the day and praying to someone who she saw was an intimate friend of hers, and that influenced her. For her, praying was never a relationship. It was sort of an intellectual exercise. She started to understand that there was a Lord, a God, a truth in a form of a person. And then she read a book by St. Teresa of Avila, her autobiography, as a matter of fact. And she read it in one night, and she said, "This is the truth." And she converted very quickly to Catholicism at that time. And she wanted immediately to become a Carmelite because she was so influenced. And her life was not her own at that time, and her spiritual director said no. So she waited 12 years, but she eventually entered the Carmel. And it was during those 12 years that she formulated much of her writing and her work for women, because she truly became, in the fullness of her faith as a Catholic woman, she understood what it was, what God designs for us, and the great attributes and gifts that He gives us. So she went about talking and speaking in public about that before she went into cloister. When she was 42 years old, she was finally able to go to the cloister to become a Carmelite nun. That's a late vocation for anybody. But she continued her scholarly work there. And at the same time, she was deeply, deeply saddened by what was going on with her people, whom she always felt Jewish, even though she converted to Catholicism. She didn't lose her Jewish roots. And she was so deeply distressed because she was a little bit prophetic. She knew. And in fact, she tried to get in touch with the Pope to let him know what was going on. She was only in the Carmel for 9 years because she had to keep moving around because the Nazis were looking for her. They knew that she was influential. They knew that she was a Carmelite and she was Jewish. And one day they came to get her. And her sister Rosa had followed her to the cloister, and they knocked on the door. They gave them 5 minutes to get up and get out. They had to go, and for 2 weeks, she was in holding for 2 weeks, and then she was gashed at Auschwitz with her sister on August 9th, 1942, I think. So that's her life in a nutshell. We can relate to that. We women know, maybe know someone, or your grandparents or your great-grandparents who were touched by the World War II, but that was her experience. And we are so blessed to have her writings that have been translated, most all of them through the Institute of Carmelite Studies. And yes, they're very scholarly. Yes, they're kind of dense. But the essence of what she has to say to women and how she really understood our gifts is what we need to know right now for the challenges of our time.
A very prominent uplifting of her work was done, as you said, by St. John Paul II, who, as a phenomenologist, which is a branch of philosophy, was the same type of field that she shared. And so it was quite extraordinary that her abundance of work, like as you said, during that 12-year period between the time she became Catholic and the time when she entered the cloister, it was truly, truly a gift to the Universal Church, wasn't it?
Absolutely. He was. Pope John Paul II, he always gave her credit with the influence that she had. She didn't get a lot of credit in academia because she was a woman and because she was Jewish. That troubled her for a time until she really, that didn't matter anymore because she knew she had a higher calling than that. But, the whole idea of, it just fascinates me. John Paul II, he was very much, he talked about entrusting and entrustment to Mary. And those are the exact words that Edith used in her writings. And they knew similar. They had contemporary friends that were in the philosophy circles, yes, but they probably never met. But they were both. But the people that Edith influenced Pope John Paul II. So there's definitely a thread. The theology of the body comes directly from Catholic personalism, and in particular the phenomenological way of viewing the human person, which is absolutely, that's what we're having an assault on, the dignity of human life. That's pertinent to every person, and particularly women today. We are really called to promote, care, nurture life in a very special way, both physically and spiritually. And Edith speaks a lot about how to go about doing that with our feminine gifts that we have.
Again, there are many resources out there to really dive into the depths of her writings, of her work. What I think is even more remarkable for all of us is the example of her life and how she lived it out. It's as though, as you were describing it earlier, because of this great ability to think, to very carefully think and reason things through, that it was when she had that encounter with truth that she became the one who could ponder, and that occurs in the heart more than the head, doesn't it?
That's right. I think she found a beautiful model in Mary, the Blessed Mother, in terms of that gift that we have of pondering in our heart, treasuring things in our heart, taking within all of the experiences that God gives us, using the beautiful gift of our receptivity, filtering it through our feminine souls, and treasuring and pondering all things in our heart. And she said, I'm going to just read something which I think is a very important point for us today, women today, but it has to do with this pondering idea. It says, before a woman can become wife and mother in a positive way, she must first mature in her own self-possession. Although woman longs to love and receive love, she must also become strong enough to be a true gift to another. So really that whole idea of self-possession and women really knowing who they are, who they're called to be, in the depths of their being, understanding their essential mission and gift to the world, gifts that they're supposed to use for the world. That's what's going to bring us our fulfillment, not what the world tells us is going to, which is this sort of counterfeit liberation, or which ends up being just a lot of licentiousness and getting what we want, trying to control everything. There's just such a distortion right now and an imbalance of the beautiful feminine nature. She predicted that this was going to happen based on what was happening to women of her time, as did many other people, like Teresa of Calcutta. So it's a truth that it's timeless. It applies to every woman of all time because it comes straight from our God, right?
What's so compelling about this is that her message isn't just for women, because just by the fact that John Paul II, it took this body of work and it helped us to identify just who we are as human persons. Of that nature, the maternal nurturing nature is as of much value as that paternal fatherhood that right. is so essential in understanding the dynamics, not just because I need to understand that about men as much as they need to understand that about women.
That's right. And I think that's why Edith, in particular, a lot of her writing, even in this Essays for Women, she contrasts a lot about the masculine versus the feminine nature and the attributes that were given. She goes into quite a lot of detail about that, maybe even more so. I think Pope John Paul's talked a lot about complementarity, right? And that union that we have. Edith made a lot of mention about the distinctions so that we do understand. We do understand the various differences and the ways that we're supposed to bring our masculinity and femininity into every, strata of our lives, not just in the home for women, but out in society. When she was asked where should women be, she said everywhere. She never, she herself was a working woman for many years. So it even transcends like the roles that we have. It certainly, it's inscribed on our hearts, and we take it in every station of our lives, which is very exciting to me.
That encounter with truth, with the person of truth, Jesus Christ, the one who would become her bridegroom, in essence, because of her desire to enter into the cloister in the Carmel, that she took to heart his imploring to be not afraid, to trust in him in that time. Because as you described her final days where the Nazis are coming to get her, she knew they were coming, and yet she made the choice to stay. There were attempts to try to get her to leave, but she felt, because of that connection in prayer, she did the one thing that a reasoning mind would have told her not to do. Instead, she had the mind of Christ, and she stayed. Yes, she did. She stayed for love of Christ and love of her people. She truly, she took on the name St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross because her surrender was complete. Her surrender to love and to truth and to grace was complete, and she did not fear the cross at all. She learned from St. John of the Cross, from St. Teresa of Avila. The cross was her love, her joy, actually, and it meant to carry it. She wanted to carry it not just for all of her peoples. When she was taken with her sister, she said, "Come, Rosa, now we must go for our people." That was for everyone. She knew that, and it was a gift that she offered of herself, completely. Absolutely. Yeah. Embracing Edith Stein, Wisdom for Women, from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. We're talking with author Anne Costa. And Anne, she does have the wonderful ability for those who are touched by her to penetrate into everyday living. I would hate for people to almost dismiss her because they think she's a highbrow saint. Yeah. Is that a fair thing to say? It is. And I think that's why I wrote this book. I wanted people to understand. I wanted people to know her heart to heart, woman to woman. And, I actually, a lot of men are reading this book. In fact, I gave it to a gentleman who was actually a Southern Baptist, a grandfather of 26, who read this book cover to cover in 3 hours. And he IM'd me, and he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "I thank you so much for introducing me to my sister Edith. And I feel like she's like my best spiritual friend. She's like my girlfriend, I have that kind of a relationship, a devotion with this saint, and because she's very practical. She's down to earth. I want to just read a little passage because she talks about women needing to quiet their souls in the hectic hubbub of the day. And she calls it a soul in agitation. She says, let me see. She says, "The duties and cares of the day ahead crowd about us when we awake in the morning, if they have not already dispelled our night's rest. Now arises the uneasy question, how can all of this be accomplished in one day? When will I do this? When that?
thus agitated, we would like to run around and rush forth. We must then take the reins in hand and say, take it easy. Not any of this may touch me now. My first morning's hour belongs to the Lord. I will tackle the day's work when He charges me with it, and He will give me the power to accomplish it. Now, how practical is that? I mean, how many women need to hear that they need to give the God the first hour, maybe to sit with the Lord for even 15 minutes, how it orders our day? She got it. I mean, she lived in modern times. She understood the pressures on women, and she had very practical, everyday advice to give to us. And that's why I wrote this book, so that I could take the essence of her message and make it useful to just the everyday average woman who's, trying to get through the day.
I've had a real blessing, I'd like to say, having really a systematic study of some of her work. And it was very enriching, and it gave me a wonderful insight on her. But Anne, I have to tell you, it wasn't until I read your book that I really appreciated the person of Edith Stein. It wasn't until, as you just said, I think you've been the good spiritual daughter, because you've helped to make her real person that you could get to know. And the layout of the book, particularly the ending sections where you read the chapter on the particular aspect of her life and her teaching, and then you have those beautiful literally pondering moments, so that we can do just as she said, take that quiet time and enter into, it's almost as though you're sitting and engaging in that heart-to-heart conversation.
Yes. I think that's the communion of saints for us, isn't it? That's the beauty. I mean, they're not up on high platforms up there. Remember, St. Teresa said, I want to do my work in heaven too, on earth through heaven. And I really believe that, the saints pick us in a way. We don't pick them. And I really feel like Edith kind of picked me to, because I just loved her from the very beginning. She's the one that sort of mothered me back into the church spiritually. And I just can't say enough about how she can influence us and help us, women and men too, in these trying, difficult times.
Trying, difficult times, I think, is an apropos way to describe how many men and women, and in particular those of faith, are feeling right now. It is a real challenge. It's a real struggle. And in some cases, there is some very real persecution, as well as just the anxiety of what's coming. You can kind of have a feeling that there's something in the air. I can't describe it, but I'm worried for my family. I'm worried for my city. I'm worried for my country. And in that, having that relationship with Edith Stein, this woman who absolutely experienced it to a degree that we may never even fathom, given what was going on in her country, her culture, with her people, she's a great one to walk with, to be able to turn to and to listen to, so that we can do just as her bridegroom said, be not afraid.
That's right. Not afraid of the cross. Not afraid of the cross, understanding the deep, the triumph that comes through the cross, the battles that we are fighting now, the war's been won. She knew that. She clung to the cross, but only because she knew that the triumph would be coming. I mean, we need to always have that eternal hope that she had to look to, that this is not the end of the story, what's going on here right now for us. And as long as we continue to walk in trust, faith, and our self-knowledge of how we are to be used as instruments of light in this world, then we are going to be okay. We cannot allow, I think this is what Edith teaches me too, is we just cannot allow ourselves to be extinguished or put down and get dark over the times, but that there is a vision that God has for us that is higher than that. We're called to it. He gives us the gifts that we need, and in every little corner of our lives, no matter how small the gesture, that if we take up that cross and follow Him, we're not alone, we follow Him, then we will, we're going to go to this ultimate triumph, and hopefully we're going to bring some people along with us. That's what we're here for, to influence in a way, and women are most particularly fulfilled when they can bring people with them to the greatest fulfillment. That we like to see people, we're here to nurture the highest potential of others. We do that with our children. We're asked to do that with our spouses as helpmates and in the greater society. That is the message that women have to get, that's their role. That's where they're going to be most effective and where they're going to be at most peace with themselves and their world if they're taking up that mission, which Edith describes very, very deliberately and distinctly for us.
Yeah, I think the book, Embracing Edith Stein, Wisdom for Women, from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, that Anne, what you've done here is not just a wonderful introduction to the life and the work of Edith Stein, but it really gives us that sense that she is not just a smart person. We all know smart people. It's those who we can say have wisdom. Wisdom is something different than just being smart, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And she grew in that wisdom through her faith. Her faith brought her to that. Her seeking of truth brought her to that wisdom. And it was also born of pain. Most of the time it is for us also. That's why we should never fear the cross, because we grow in virtue and wisdom. And then we're in a position to offer that to others.
Well, I hope people will embrace this book, Embracing Edith Stein, because I think it is an opportunity to really draw a wonderful glass of wisdom from that well, and to just take time with it, and then to go further with it. I wish we had more time to be able to talk about this, but any final thoughts, Anne, that you'd like to share?
Well, I would just invite you to, get to know my friend Edith through this book. That's the invitation.
Wonderful. It's a great invitation. Anne Costa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kris.
With Anne Costa, we've gone inside the pages of Embracing Edith Stein, Wisdom for Women, from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. To learn more about this book or to obtain a copy, go to franciscanmedia.org, the website for its publisher, Servant Books, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and or to download this discussion along with many others, go to discerninghearts.com. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Join me next time for Inside the Pages, insights from today's most compelling authors.